I enjoy competing against myself, but winning my age group at High Rocks doesn't really do much for me. It's more the progression to win my age group in High Rocks that does something for me. It's the work that I put in that allowed me to do that really, really, lights me on fire. So I enjoy the journey. I enjoy the daily grind of doing the thing more than I enjoy being on top of the mountain with something.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Kronos Group Podcast. I am your host, Jerry Brazie, also here with Matt Floyd, and we are very excited to have Eric Hinman with us today. Let me tell you about Eric. Eric's probably best known for his endurance athletics. He can tell us that his investing in high growth wellness brands, building his personal brand out, discipline, and doing really hard things. I'm interested in hearing about the Founders Only Club and what he's doing there along with it, because building a company, as I have said many times, is one of the most difficult things to do. And he has done many difficult things. So I'm excited to talk about that. And he didn't just build a brand, he curated a founder community that with retreats and events that operators can show up for. These are guys that are running companies. And like I said, this is what people who are entrepreneurs should be looking for. So today we're going to pull that curtain back a little bit, find out what that is all about, while also finding out what else he is up to. Eric, we appreciate you coming on the podcast. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing awesome. Thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely. Let's start with, give us the cliche kind of 3-minute background to anybody who doesn't know who you are, what kind of brought you to the point where you're sitting here today.
Yeah, so I'm a guy who really enjoys working out. That's how most know me. I got into triathlon and Ironman in my late 20s. I was fairly out of shape before that, sitting in a car, driving 50,000 miles a year, selling insurance to campgrounds and marinas in upstate New York. And then I found a personal trainer who helped me get back into aesthetically decent looking shape, and met some friends who were competing in a half Ironman that was coming to Syracuse, New York, which is where I'm from. And I was really intrigued by the bikes they had. I thought they were really cool with 4 handlebars and the aero position that they were going to be in to do the race. They told me the distance, that it was a 1.2 mile swim, a 56 mile bike, and a half marathon. And I'm like, you guys can do that in a day? And they're like, yeah, people do it in 4 hours. And I was just very taken back that that was something people could do. So I signed up for a local triathlon club. I taught myself how to swim, and ultimately, did my first triathlon in 2010, my first half Ironman in 2011, my first full Ironman in 2012. And then in 2013 and 2014, I qualified for the Ironman World Championships. And that time period drastically changed my life. I went from, just being kind of the normal 9-to-5 guy building a business to being this elite amateur triathlete with a social media following. And, as I sit here today, I have made wellness a major part of my life for the last 16, 17 years. And now I help consumer brands build their brand through brand awareness, helping them build ambassador programs, putting on events for them, helping them with content strategy. And then I have 2 other organizations, one called Founders Only, which is wellness retreats and an online community for entrepreneurs, creators, and investors. And then I have another event-based organization called the World's Toughest Mile. We're rolling that out this year in 4 to 5 cities. The World's Toughest Mile is on a track, 1 lap of burpee broad jumps, 1 lap bear crawl, 1 lap lunge, 1 lap run. So something that's accessible to all, but it's pretty difficult.
Let's talk about back 2010. Let's go back to when you got interviewed or introduced to this. We always see this where the body is so much stronger than the mind, and so many of our minds give out before the body does. I think that is true. I can't think of something that proves that any more than what you tried to do. Any one of those 3 things, particularly to somebody who is like me, who has never swam, to think that I would go swim 2.5 miles seems impossible to me, or bike for 110, or I've done half marathons lately, but it's so impossible, it seems, in the brain, and the brain gets in the way so much. What do you tell people about, that difference between the mind and the body?
I think you have to train both. Training your body, I think we understand how to do that by going to the gym, by running, biking, and periodization. But the mind is very similar, where you can raise your ceiling. And I think some of it is things you can do on your own, but also who you surround yourself with. It's very normalized now in my friend group to have done an Ironman, to have done Leadville, to have done the Moab 240, to be a CrossFit Games athlete, to be an Elite 15 High Rocks athlete. So when you surround yourself with those types of people, it raises your ceiling to what's possible. And the more high performers I've spent time with, the more I realized that they just focused on one thing for long enough to get really good at it. And that's really what that Ironman chapter taught me, is I had to start saying no to a lot of the distractions so I could just focus on being really good at one thing. Same is true for the $1 billion business owner. They said no to a lot of things to be able to build that business, that $1 billion business. So yeah, it taught me focus, doing one thing repetitively in a smart way. Like there's a difference between going through the motions and actually doing something where there's purpose and intention each day. But yeah, your mind is such a big part of endurance sports. It teaches you how to endure.
Yeah, I think it lends itself to, in the business world, the story is similar. I was sitting behind a desk at 28 years old, kind of trying to figure out what I was going to do. I'm a street kid. I was living with hookers and heroin addicts at 17 years old. And here I was helping a woman run her business at 28. And I had an epiphany that said I needed to shut up and listen. And in order to do that, or I was going to be sitting doing the same thing I was doing then when I was 50 years old. I'm now 57. And what I did is I figured out, Eric, that I was talking sports, playing sports, watching sports while talking sports, eating while watching and talking and playing sports. And I wasn't doing anything to move forward. Somebody had sent me a pro forma about it, starting a business, having me lead the company. And I didn't know what I was looking at. So I had this epiphany that said, shut up and listen. And what I learned was I had to get rid of everybody around me that I had grown up in that sports community. And I surrounded myself with people who were smarter than me, who knew things that who were educated and had backgrounds and accountants. And the first guy I ever met was an architect in a basketball league. And I thought I had nothing in common with this person. Turns out I had a lot to learn from these professionals. And I literally, within the course of a couple of months, left all my friends behind and went on to, start a dozen businesses or so. And so really that hanging out with the people who you aspire to be like and want to be with, that can challenge you, that's critical. That's critical, I think.
I can't agree more. And, I do this on a micro level every single night, where I have people come over to our homes and they do contrast therapy with me, sitting in a hot sauna, going into an ice bath, multiple rounds. The sauna, your phone is going to overheat if you have it in there with you. And there's something about that high heat that just brings out vulnerability in everyone. So I've met thousands of people through having people come to our home and do that contrast therapy routine with me. And through that's how I learn. And I don't tune into much. I don't watch TV. I very rarely am going to live sporting events. I really enjoy progressing in business, progressing in sport myself, and then interacting with other people and getting my knowledge from other people.
Yeah, that's great. So the companies, as you've started them, the Founder Club in particular, my background again is why I was so interested in talking to you, and Matt was able to reach out to you, is because I joined a peer group at 30 years old and it changed my life. And I didn't even know what it was. And I sat there for the first 2.5 years and just learned really. And because I didn't have much to offer, and everybody in the group was older than I was, as it turned out, and had a whole bunch of experience. Again, those guys that knew more than I did. And so the value of one of those groups is for me was just so important. What was it behind it for you that said, I'm going to start something like this Founders Group?
Yeah, it just stems from those nightly sauna hangs that I was already having. I recognize the power of putting similar people in an environment where they can have communication with each other and learn from each other. And 4 years ago, I invited 15 friends who own brands to come to our house for a couple days. And, we went on some runs together. We hiked mountains. We sat in hot saunas. We jumped in cold streams. And everyone walked away from that experience saying, I didn't know how much I needed just quality time with other people living a similar life, building similar things, being a life athlete, being a father, being a husband, building a business. Like everyone benefited from the other people in the room. So, what I recognized from that was I needed to turn that into something more formal, where we did this on a regular basis, just getting people doing similar things together so they could get to know each other in a natural setting and in an environment where everyone's endorphins were racing and they can rapidly connect with each other.
So bad habits play a huge part in everybody's life. Is there a a specific instance or something that you can point to or something that you've seen having worked with so many people that you'd say, that's the number one? Maybe it's watching television, maybe it's social media, something that anybody listening might look at and say, okay, Eric's seen this, a dozen times or 100 times. This is the thing that you need to get yourself away from if you're hoping to start to make these changes.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one that many struggle with is intention, just not living their life with intention, just kind of being a to-do list, tuning into what others are doing, not really having passion and purpose with their life. And all of that changed for me during that Ironman time period where I had hours on end by myself biking and running. And I consider those years to be my psychedelic experience where I recognized how I wanted to shape my life, that I wanted to prioritize wellness, that I wanted to hit a morning workout every single day, that I wanted to do recovery in the afternoon, and I wanted to meet new people, and I wanted to start building businesses around my passions. So I think it's just, we live in a world where there's just constant distraction. We can go so many different ways. We have society telling us to just chase money and chase the public perception of success and buy nice cars and buy a nice house and just kind of get trapped by these things that then force us to continue doing something that we may not love, a job that we might not love, friends that maybe are not raising our ceiling anymore. So I think it's just being really intentional and starting to recognize what really lights you on fire every single day. Who are the friends? What are the conversations you're having on a daily basis where you felt like you were giving and getting value? What are the activities where you were just in flow state? You didn't want to be doing anything else. What environment do you thrive in? Do you need to belong by an ocean, in the mountains, the sun shining every single day? Like all of these things I crafted for myself intentionally.
How many relationships did that get rid of for you? Did you lose some people along the way that didn't understand what you were going through, what you were doing?
Yeah, 100%. And, there were no hard feelings or big breakups. I just started leaning in more towards my friends who were competing in endurance sports during the period of time when I was competing in endurance sports. And, now many of my friends, they own brands in the wellness space because that's what I'm really interested in. So I guess I've always been good at surrounding myself with the people who are living a similar life that I'm living in that chapter. And, I think we all go through chapters. Like I loved my friends in my 20s. We had so much fun partying together. But then I started writing a new chapter and I needed, new friends, new environments for me to thrive in that chapter of life.
Yeah, I like that. For entrepreneurs, surrounding yourself has been so important. Like I said, for me in particular, what is something that we are all lying about to ourselves about regarding balance? You hear balance all of the time, right? I hear it all the time on social media. You can't have a home life. You can't have a work life. You have to pick one. It's got to be, 9 to 5, and you got to have all of this time with your kids. And you can't make the sacrifices that so many generations before us have done and still have that kind of balance. What do you think about that? Entrepreneurs and the lies they tell themselves, or want to be entrepreneurs, even people looking for success, maybe even just people getting healthy with their bodies. What do they lie to themselves about when it comes to that?
I think we juggle too many balls. Like, I think you need to recognize what are the glass balls that you don't want to drop. Family, obviously very important. Making money so that you can provide for your family, very important. Things you're passionate about, very important. Again, I just think that we say yes to too many things that distract us from what is really important. And then the other key is time blocking. I time block my days, and I recognize that when you have a family and kids, which I do not have, that time blocking sometimes may go out the window, but the more you can be intentional with how you structure your day, the better. Like I don't miss a morning workout. That is a non-negotiable for me. I try to get outside for at least an hour every single day. After this podcast, I'm going to go for a bike ride. I'm going to do contrast therapy tonight with friends and some new friends who are coming over. I'm going to eat single ingredient foods that fuel me. I'm going to learn something. I'm going to create some content today. Like I do the same things repetitively. Those are the glass balls that I can't drop. And I don't do much outside of those things that I do with intention. So I think it's just not structuring your day in a way where you really prioritize the things that mean the most to you.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think as somebody who raised kids, you hit something on the head. I always call it quality time over quantity. And so many times we fool
Yeah.
ourselves by telling ourselves that we need quantity time, right? And really what we mean is quality time, in particular with the family, because you go home, the kids go to bed at 8:30 and you're sitting on the couch not doing anything, where you have 2-3 hours that you could have kept going. So to your point, those time block for your kids, and just make sure that it's quality time for those that are having kids, and you can do both things. You ever worry about becoming addicted, or are you, to the next challenge or to your health in that perspective?
No, I already went through that. The Ironman years, I was very addicted to endurance, but I pounded myself into the ground, and I recognized that my head went above the ceiling. I did not feel good anymore from doing too much endurance training. My body didn't feel good. I lost my stoke for competing in triathlon. So I've been careful to make sure what I do now I can do repeatedly, because I want to continue doing this for many, many years to come. So it is easy to get addicted to endurance, especially long endurance, Ironmans and ultras. And oftentimes you can get to a point where, you're just as unhealthy as someone who's not working out. You can tank your testosterone, you need knee surgery, hip surgery, back surgery. So yeah, what is it that you can do repeatedly where you feel good day in and day out? And I've found that balance for myself, and I still train very high volume. And you certainly don't have to train as high volume as I do to be fit, but I enjoy competing in sport. So I also do what's necessary to be competitive in my age group and mountain bike races and high rocks races.
So
Yeah,
go ahead,
I was
Matt.
gonna throw something in there. Earlier, Eric, you alluded to passion is what drives you, but I feel like your passion is very different than a majority of people's passions, because passions for some are, oh, I'm gonna go hang out with my friends, live on a beach, hang out the south of France. But your passion was putting yourself through the hard things and improving on the hard things. Like Ironmans aren't easy, and that was your passion. But what was that driver beyond the passion that had you be able to pursue the business stuff down the road, or that next Ironman? Like, what was the initial passion was the igniter, but what was that thing that kept you going throughout doing those hard things repetitively and consistently?
Yeah, I mean, I like the way I feel. Certainly get a state change from exercise. When I woke up this morning, I didn't feel as good as I felt after my 60-minute workout that I did today. So I am addicted to the feeling of exercise, but I would argue that it's a good addiction, because it's an addiction without consequences, where, you can get that same high from doing drugs, but there's going to be a consequence associated with that. So I love that feeling I get from exercise or from type 2 fun, where in the moment it may be a little miserable, but afterwards I know I'm going to feel amazing the rest of the day. And by amazing, I mean good energy, mental clarity. My body feels good. I'm just ready to tackle the day, because I probably did the hardest thing I'm going to do all day that morning with that workout. And I also think that we just prioritize the wrong things. Again, we become a to-do list, and instead of prioritizing the things that fuel us, we prioritize the things that we think we need to get done just to be busy, instead of prioritizing the things that really fuel our day and fuel that energy and fuel our progression. And I guess that's the other thing that I'm really, really driven by, is progress. I love progressing. I always have. I played sports in high school. I always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I really like defining my own destiny based on my purposeful hard work. So I love progression. And I love obstacles. I don't have to do Leadville anymore. I've already done it a number of times, but I enjoy having that obstacle in my life each year where I have to purposely train for it. And I love the purposeful progression of getting fitter. I can see my wattage go up on my bike. I can see my run pace go down as my heart rate goes down. I can see my strength numbers go up. So I really, really enjoy progress way more than I enjoy competition now. I enjoy competing against myself, but winning my age group at High Rocks doesn't really do much for me. It's more the progression to win my age group in High Rocks that does something for me. It's the work that I put in that allowed me to do that really, really, lights me on fire. So I enjoy the journey. I enjoy the daily grind of doing the thing more than I enjoy being on top of the mountain with something.
So let me back up a little bit and let's talk to because that's so true. And in particular, when you're going to try to lose weight and get in shape. And again, I'll just use my own story. 2021, I was laying in a hospital bed down 4 pints of blood, 310 pounds. I was dying on my way out at 51 years old. And I was like, I got unborn grandkids that I got to go live for. I lost 108 pounds in 8.5 months. I put on 30 pounds of muscle at my age, and I've never been healthier at 57 years old. And to your point, I broke my back when I was 19 years old. I've had 17 surgeries. I couldn't walk. I was addicted to opioids, a 200 milligram a day habit for 20, 25 years just to be able to get out of bed in the morning. I walked it took me 24 minutes to walk a quarter mile, January 1st, 2022. I had to sit down 3 times, but I was committed at that point because I'd gotten to that bottom. And then by the 3rd month, I was walking 4 miles. And by May, I was walking 8 miles. And then I started lifting weights, and I only eat carnivore. And, I turned habit into a lifestyle. The thing that you said that made me think about that was that every day almost when you're in that terrible a position, when you're as obese and dying as I was, every day was a little bit better. I mean, and then it got to be every week, and I was losing weight so fast and the clothes were coming off of me, and, a little bit of muscle started showing up. And when I started lifting in May, I started feeling better. So there was a high, to use your point. I've never done drugs, I've opioids, but I've never, done into anything illegal. But the high that I got every time I lost another 10 pounds, when that scale would go from, 50 to 49, and I'm like, that's another 10 down. I was high as a kite, and I didn't wallow in it for too long. I kind of gave myself a minute to say, nice job, Jerry, you did it. But those little things, another weight, putting another plate on there, extra effort, any of those things was really significant for me in changing my life. So someone like me, circa 4 years ago, that's just dying and obese and has no drive and was on his way out and turned it around, it's hard to look at someone like you, Eric, and say, you're all in shape and you've done this your whole life, and I'm on the far end of that. That's kind of my story. My impetus was the children. What do you tell somebody, maybe an entrepreneur? This is a long-winded question. I apologize. Entrepreneur that is just not driven to get up off that couch, but it was in the same position that I am and says, I can't do what Eric does. Look at that guy.
Thanks for sharing that story. That's powerful. I would say that, starting is the hardest part. I still have trouble sometimes starting a run, but I know once I get a couple miles into that run that I'll get into flow state with it and I'll feel better afterwards. So starting is the hardest part. And then you have to give it enough time that you hit the progress curve and you start to see progress. Once we get to flow state, once you've done it enough that you start to see improvement, I think that is when all of a sudden you make it habit because you see the progress with it. But most people quit before they see that real progress curve. Like, one day in the gym isn't going to get you there. 2 months in the gym, you might start to see it. 6 months in the gym, if you're consistent, you're going to see it. You'll have hit that progress curve where you're like, this is working. I'm going to keep doing it. So giving it enough time, whether it's that run that you're going on or, it's the fitness journey that you're going on. And then I would say second to that is I've been doing this for 17 years. And each year early on, I picked something new to tackle. The first year it was exercise, hiring the personal trainer to get back into shape. The next year it was diet. The next year it was sleep. The next year it was supplements. The next year it was recovery. Each year was something new until I made it a habit, and then it became a lifestyle. So don't try to tackle all of it at once. Know that anyone who's been really successful in something, it's probably been a series of compounding consistencies that got them to where they are. And again, I was an out of shape insurance salesman when I was 27 years old. When I was 32, I was at the Ironman World Championships. So it doesn't take a wildly amount of time to get there, but you got to commit to several years of doing something to get to be world class at it. And that's not to say that someone might want to be world class at it, but just do it long enough that you can get good at it and see the progress and make it habitual and then ultimately make it a lifestyle. And, again, I really look at life as chapters, writing one chapter at a time until you can start writing that next chapter. But don't try to write a million chapters at the same time because it'll get you nowhere.
Yeah, that's great advice. 3 weeks, by the way, is what I have seen in I don't do this for a living. I go out and I do my miles every day. And so I tell people on social media, just, you can have my hour on the mile if you just want to talk. They see what I've done, and they will go back and forth, and they will start their food. Food's the most important for me, if you're obese. And
Yep.
3 weeks. And I hear from them every day. And then you can set your clock by it. 3 weeks. They can't see, and I tell them in advance 3 weeks, and they just can't seem to get over that 3-week hump, which is the one, to your point, that, if you make 3 weeks, you're probably going to make 3 months. And if you make 3 months, it might be a lifestyle. But there seems to be just that disconnect, at least in my experience. I've probably done this with 50 or 70 people, that they disappear on me right at that 3-week mark. What do you think that is?
Again, I think distractions get in the way. I think that many people have a hard time focusing because we're just bombarded with all of these options in life. And also, you need the structure. It's difficult to find the structure with only 3 weeks, meaning, the right environment, changing your routines, substituting one thing for another, finding the friends that will, hold you accountable. Oftentimes when I'm doing something new that I want to become habit, is I'll just put a reminder in my calendar every single day for 6 months. If I want to do yoga and I want to take up yoga, I'll just put a reminder in my calendar, 5 days a week at 4:30 p.m. to do yoga. And, by the time that 6 months is up, that's a new practice I'm doing every single week. So just make it a part of your day. And I also think giving up a bad habit is much more difficult if you don't replace it with something else. Like for me, my late night partying was replaced with early morning bike rides. And I started to really enjoy the early morning bike rides more than I enjoyed the late night partying, and they just didn't go hand in hand. So I gave up the late night partying, and it wasn't just like cold turkey. It was over a period of weeks and months. But, once I completely replaced it with this new behavior, that's all I wanted to do was the new behavior. And I had no interest in the old behavior.
Yeah. Earlier,
go ahead,
I was going to say earlier, Eric, you said how it's hard to start sometimes even runs. And for me, I know there's this voice of doubt, or this voice of kind of the subconscious when right before you're about to try to do something and keep at it and be consistent with it. How do you quiet that voice in your head or overpower that voice? And for entrepreneurs and business owners that are listening, how can they kind of go about overcoming that doubt to just jump in and do it and put that first step, go from 0 to 1, and then keep doing that every day? Like, what was that kind of mentality shift for you?
Yeah, I think the structure is key, doing things at similar times each day, and then it just becomes habitual. You don't have to think about it anymore. The more you do it, the more resilient to it you become. Like, I still feel a certain way whenever I get into an ice bath. And if I get out of the routine of doing ice baths, it's really easy to be out of the routine of doing ice baths because I don't want that feeling. But if I'm doing it 4 or 5 days a week, then I'm resilient to it. I did it yesterday. Of course I can do it again today. No big deal. So I think the repetition, the time blocking, the structure of doing it repetitively, those are the keys to success in anything.
Yeah, and really that's the key too. In a lot of ways, the health side of things, I think that health is success, and entrepreneurship, life, whatever it is downstream of health. I think we can be we can be unhealthy. You can be obese, you can be fat and still find success. But I found, particularly in my change, and I was healthy most of my life, it improved my life in ways I could not have ever imagined. Physically, obviously being the most important, but mentally, I became sharper. I became more aggressive. I became smarter, right? I was thinking quicker. Emotionally, I've been married almost 30 years now, and my relationship with my wife, I'm a better husband, I'm a better friend, I'm a better uncle, I'm a better man, across the board. And then spiritually, it really took me to a level. Maybe it's a combination of my age and maturity and all of those things coming together. And I've had some success in the past, and it really leveled all of those things up in a way that just then everything downstream of that became easier. I don't want, entrepreneurship is hard, running business is hard, relationships are hard, but it made something that's very hard to do easier. Why is that not something you think that we just, that's not out there more, that's the key? I'll just say one real quick thing. I always tell people, if you could live in my body for 5 minutes whatever sacrifice you think you have to go through to lose that 100, 150 pounds and get in shape is cheap. But you don't know that when you're 150 pounds overweight because, you're having to put in the sacrifices and the habits like what we're talking about.
I mean, I think we all want the simple solution, and we're marketed the simple solution. We're marketed the caffeine product, the nicotine product, the pre-workout, the whatever it is for that secret shortcut. But I mean, the workout is what gives you the energy and clarity. And if caffeine or a pre-workout or a nootropic of some kind allow you to hit that workout, then great. But ultimately, it's putting in the work that yields that energy and clarity. That's why I do it. I generally schedule all of my calls where I need to be really on immediately following a workout, because that's when I know that I'm going to be the sharpest and I'm going to bring my best energy forward. If we had this call right when I woke up at 6:30 this morning, like I wouldn't have as much energy and I wouldn't be as sharp. So I recognized that over the years that it's just fueled the best version of my mind, my emotional well-being, my energy levels. So that's why I do it. But it's the hardest thing you can do to yield it. That's what we're marketed, at least. Like, here's all the secret hacks to get there, when it's really like, just get outside, do the work, go for a run, go for a bike ride, hit the gym, lift heavy weights, get your heart rate elevated. Like, that's the hack.
You hit it earlier, just momentarily. I want to come back to it real quick because I think, if we're talking to an obese crowd, the thing that is the most important to get started, or at least for me, you tell me if you agree with this. You said eat one ingredient food. I've been a carnivore now for 4 years, and it just works wonders for me. So I'm not going to jump up and down and say carnivore is the right way to do it. It just works for me, and I've had a lot of success doing it. But it's one ingredient foods, right? And it's very simple to do. And that diet for that 330-pound dude is going to be the critical part to get started. And yet, to your point, we're marketed something completely different. So just to touch on that, if you would, about one ingredient foods that you mentioned earlier, give an idea from your perspective what that is.
Yeah. And, 80% of my diet is that. 20% of my diet, I'm having bars, or I'll have some chips, or I'll have dessert at night. But 80% of the time, single ingredient food sourced from nature. So shopping the perimeter of the grocery store, fruit, vegetables, meats, fish, dairy, that's the bulk of my diet. And, this is different than some, but I tend to build my calories throughout the day. I eat pretty light during the day because I find that's when my mind is the sharpest. And then I usually have a pretty big dinner because I don't really care as much about my energy levels or my mental clarity after that. And I'm eating enough throughout the day so that I'm not hungry and angry, but not so much that I feel lethargic. Just think about the Thanksgiving meal you have. What do you do afterwards? You lay on the couch and you watch football. I don't want to feel like that during the day. I don't mind feeling like that at night because I'm just going to go to sleep afterwards. I try not to do it too close to my bedtime. But, I tend to eat light throughout the day. That's just how I feel the sharpest and feel the most energetic. But it's not rocket science. There's so many processed foods out there. Sugar makes you feel good for that quick hit, but then you have a crash afterwards. Many of us consume way too much caffeine, and there's consequences associated with too much caffeine to just we're overriding signals in our nervous system, that maybe tell us to take a break. You're exhausted. You've pushed too hard. So yeah, and the other thing I think is the structure around it. I eat around the same times each day, and I eat similar foods each day so that I don't have decision-making fatigue around food. We don't keep a lot of junk in our pantry because if I have it in the pantry, if I have Sour Patch Kids in a drawer that are fueling my bike races, I'll have them throughout the day because they're there. So we keep that stuff out of our pantry. And again, I'm eating similar foods each day. And for me, what that looks like is breakfast and lunch is usually either a smoothie or smoothie bowl, or eggs, fruit, and honey. And then for dinner, most nights, I'm having some kind of meat, some kind of carb, like a potato or rice, and then some kind of veggie. And then almost every single night, I have some frozen berries, honey, and yogurt for my dessert, an hour before I go to bed. That's what my diet looks like 80% of the time.
I love it. I love it. Let's switch to business a little bit now and talk about entrepreneurship is hard. I say it all the time. It's very difficult to do. So you are working in the wellness brands. Talk about what it takes. I hear this all of the time. I'm particularly at the gym, Lifetime Gym where I go. We're starting a new supplement company. I'm like, man, if I hear one more time somebody starting a supplement company, I just, how can any supplement company make a living? The competition seems to be so fierce. And then when you dig into it, there's no real concept. The idea of starting a supplement company and the concept of running a business and starting one are two very, very, very different things. So from your side, what's your advice to somebody on the outside looking in, not necessarily a supplement company, just an entrepreneur looking to get involved and get a business started about the mountain that they're about to climb?
Yeah, I mean, it's never really been easier to start a business because of the internet and because of social media. You still have to figure out the manufacturing process, but there's co-mans, and it's just become easy to start a business, which I think makes it harder to build a successful business because so many people can start a business now. I look at sticky revenue versus revenue. What is something that someone is going to subscribe to because it makes them feel a certain way? A product that helps you sleep better. If you get better sleep, then you're probably going to subscribe to that product for a very long period of time. And if it's just a one-off product where you're only going to buy it once, like let's say clothing, that's kind of a difficult business because it's going to get more and more expensive to acquire customers. Most brands now, they start online, at least in my world. They start as direct to consumer and they leverage advertising on Google and Meta. They're hiring people like me who have trust and authority with their audience to create content for them and promote their products on their channel. And, again, that makes it fairly easy to start the business up. But I think the misconception is that just by hiring someone like me, or let's take a celebrity, even with millions of followers, that they're instantly just going to crush it. They're going to hit a home run because they partnered with that person. And that's just not the case. Mm-hmm. It takes a long time to build a brand. It takes a long time to acquire a number of customers that believe in your brand and believe in your product. And, I think it's really easy to lose brand equity if you're just constantly trying to sell your product and you're not actually building a brand and building something that people want to be a part of. I think that's another important key that many miss. They just have this product that they think solves a problem, and they don't build a brand around it where you're making people feel like they're part of something, and they just, they love your products and they just want to keep buying it because of, how awesome the brand is. Take Liquid Death, for example. It's water in a can. There's a million other waters in a can. Why did they scale so fast? Why are they $1 billion plus valued company? They built a brand. They have personality. People want to be a part of it. People want to buy their apparel and wear their apparel. It's a water brand. So, that's the power of brand equity. And then again, just think about what is sticky? What problem am I solving? Who is my audience? I think many people, they try to go too broad early on. They try to be everything to everyone instead of solving a problem that is a major problem for someone who has asthma, and you come out with a product that solves their asthma. If I have asthma, I'm going to do anything in the world to help get rid of that asthma. But, instead that company says, we help everyone breathe better, and they go after the masses instead of just the people with asthma. Always start niche, figure out who has the biggest problem that you're solving, go after them, and then expand. Facebook started on one college campus. Now the entire world uses Meta, but they started on one college campus and they perfected a social network for one college campus. So just how can I acquire that first customer? How can I repeat that? And then start to think about scaling the company, building a brand.
So as you're seeing in your community of founders and entrepreneurs start to join the Founders Only Club, what are some of the key differences that you see between successful operators and operators that are constantly failing? Are there, is it a mindset? Is it more of digging into their business and seeing hey, this is where they're just lacking in leadership, lacking in performance of their overall business, digging in, what are those kind of KPIs that you look for that are creating those differences of winners versus the failures?
Yeah. So business is a skill. And, if you've operated businesses and this is your third business, like you've acquired a lot of skill in the sport of business. So, knowledge is important. Your network is very important. Your team is very important. So, those are the ones who have the best of those are the ones who are going to build a good business. As someone young just getting into it, again, who thinks they can partner with someone who has a following and that person is just going to instantly blow up their brand, like, they're very naive. And I was very naive. I had a software company back in 2009, and we thought that by advertising on like a New York City subway would just blow us up. It didn't work. It takes time. And I learned that lesson the hard way, spending money on something that we should not have been spending money on the time. We should have done way more guerrilla marketing, figured out who our customer was before spending money on, that just broad brand awareness. So I think the best entrepreneurs, they're solving a major problem. They understand exactly who their customer is. They understand how to acquire that customer and how to get in front of that customer. They understand the cost to get that customer. They understand what their value is so they can price their product appropriately. And they understand repeat revenue. They understand how to lock that customer in. Take Whoop or Oura Ring or, any of these subscription-based companies. Once you have it and you have the data, you don't want to lose the data. So you keep paying the subscription fee. Those are very savvy business owners and businesses. So yeah, those are some of the things that I look for. And now it's just becoming more and more important to command attention. So that's another skill that I'm looking at in a founder and or their team or what third-party agencies they're hiring is how good are they at getting people's attention? Content now is the name of the game. And can they create content that reels people in so that people are interested in their brand or their product that they're selling?
I wanted to ask you along those lines of business, kind of go back to the personal for a second. For you, when I was 28 years old, my son was born, and it changed my life from, again, this street kid to what I ultimately became. And when my son was born, my entire outlook, one second he was not there, the next second he was there, and I had to go split atoms. I mean, I had to go change the world. I was not going to let my son grow up in the same world that I did. I went on to have 2 more kids, and really my lease on life, I say I'm a caveman, and I go out every single day willingly, and I climb through that grass, risking something getting a hold of me or through the forest and something's going to grab hold of me from above and knock that pterodactyl over the head and drag it back so that my family can eat comfortably in the warm cave. And I do that willingly. That's my sacrifice. That's my purpose. That's the reason I'm there. So I went from a street kid to 28 years old to starting my first company. I was a millionaire at 33. I've done $500 million in revenue. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what an interest rate was when I bought a house. I didn't know what equity was. I mean, I was just an idiot, but I just wanted to learn. And once my son was born, once my children were born, that gave me that hunger at a level that I didn't understand, the ability to be uncomfortable, to just go out there and take what I could find and push myself beyond anything I could have imagined. So in that question is, from your perspective, that's my story. That's what built my career and onto doing something very difficult in the entrepreneurial space. What's your hunger? Is there something that you get, that you've done all of these things that has driven you to this point? Because most entrepreneurs I know have a chip on their shoulder.
I mean, I think it's that progress. Again, I just enjoy progressing in business. I enjoy progressing in sport. I like the daily grind of purposeful progress, figuring out from others what is the way and then replicating the way that they paved. So that's really what fuels me. I don't have any kids again. And I guess my parents also have instilled in me the power of hard work and, that you need to have intention in your life in order to succeed in something. So just watching them work hard as a kid, that instilled that hard work ethic in me. But I mean, the reason why I picked entrepreneurship, the reason why I've picked the sports I compete in is because I like to control my outcome. I like to control the purposeful progress each day that gets me closer to that outcome, whatever it may be. And again, I love the journey. Like, the outcome for me is not as rewarding as the journey to get there. And, I really recognize that, the first year when I got to Kona, that, it was a high, obviously, crossing that finish line and knowing that I was at the Ironman World Championships. But I think the real joy was all of the work that I put in to get there and all of the sacrifice that I made in order to get there. That was the rewarding part of the process.
You said hard work in there watching your parents. Just for the record and for social media, how important is hard work?
It's super important. I mean, you need to put in the hours, you need to put in the reps and the sets in order to, gain the strength and gain the resilience and get to where you want to go. And it's not just hard work either. It's purposeful hard work and is pulling levers. Now that I've amassed a massive network and, I've amassed capital, now it's using those levers to allow those things to compound. So, I'm building out AI tools right now that are able to take a lot of those connections I've made in my head and connect people using an AI tool. And, obviously money compounds. Like, instead of letting it just sit in the bank, you put it into stocks and bonds and equities and mutual funds. So, like, using those levers so that things start to compound is where I'm at now in life. Like, recognizing, okay, I've built these things. How can I now leverage them to get me further ahead than just like doing the thing repetitively every day? Like, I could just keep connecting people like that come over to sauna, like people in my head, but can AI do it better if I voice dictate all the people I met today, what the conversation was, who they could benefit from knowing, and then I just let an AI tool do it? Of course. So it's using tools that can help advance you as you've compounded things over time.
What was the value in that? Again, I just keep referring to myself just to give an example, but I had a large transportation company, and so from that, one day I just like, man, I buy millions of dollars worth of gas. I need to buy gas stations so I can buy gas for myself, and all my employees can gas up their own cars. And then it was car washes, and then convenience stores, and really, I was build houses and do different things. So I started a woodworking company, just different things, kind of offshot from me from that one thing that I started so many years ago. Talking about the Founders Only Club, was that kind of just made sense and it dovetailed into other businesses that you were doing, or is it the other way around?
Yeah, 1,000%. It was what I was already doing, and then I built a business around it. I mean, same with the brand deals. It was something I was doing, but didn't really build a business or systems around it until it got to a point where I'm like, okay, this is a hell of an opportunity. I need to build a business and a personal brand and systems around that. So Founders Only is the same thing. I was already doing it. I was hosting people nightly. I was connecting founders of companies, and I enjoy, basically being a Airbnb for wellness and having people push past their ceilings when it comes to exercise or endurance endeavors that they've done, or sitting in a sauna or jumping in a cold body of water. So I just took those things I was already doing and built a business around it. And it's something I enjoy. Like, it's literally a day in my life that I get to do with 40 amazing people around me. So I was already doing it on a smaller level. So I just wanted to formalize it and build a business around it.
What do you do if the entrepreneur comes to you and says, I want in, but he's not in shape, or those things aren't priorities for him? It's not a good fit.
I mean, I generally attract people who are into wellness and working out, because that's a huge part of what the Founders Only experiences are. We're doing hard workouts. We're going to do contrast therapy. So, I'm not marketing it in a way that you would think it's something else. So it is a part of it. And while I would love to be inclusive for everyone, I also want this to be a day in my life. I'm just done chasing money to chase money. I only want to build businesses that are really revolving around my passions and the types of people that I want to surround myself with. I've had other businesses where I was doing it just for the money and it was transactional, and I don't want to do that anymore. I want relation-based businesses.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I wanted to know, have you ever let the wrong person in when it came to like the Founders Only Club, or even just within your own circle, that you were like, that was actually not a good decision after a few months?
Very rarely. Just, I've done this so much. I'm a very good judge of character because I've met so many people and I know if it's going to be a good fit or not a good fit. I would say the only thing I've done is I've put on retreats where it attracted people who are a bit energy draining. And not that I don't enjoy giving back and, helping improve people's lives, but this is an extreme example. But let's say that I had 7 people who were alcoholics that were trying to get over their alcoholism come and spend, 3 days with me. That can be draining if someone is like very down in the dumps and they're looking at you to just completely change their life. I'm not a therapist. That's not my strong suit. So, I tend to do this for people who just need help progressing. They are in a position where they figured out what they want to do, how they want to live their life around wellness, but they need to meet the other right people to progress, or they want their ceiling raised. Their ceiling is down here and I'm going to help them raise their ceiling up here. So I would say that's the only thing I've done where I recognize that, okay, this isn't a strong suit of mine. This really was energy draining. I'll do it here and there, but I don't want to do it on a regular basis because I don't want to feel like a therapist. That's not my strong suit.
So talk to the entrepreneurs. Maybe they're not in the wellness space like you are to the extent that you are, but they're out there and they're struggling or they're doing well. Again, just your basic entrepreneur, 6, 7, 8-figure entrepreneurs. What I think that mentorship is very important. I think being along to a group like what you're doing is just absolutely critical, as I said earlier. What is your take on that? What's your advice to them relative to any group, any person, find a mentor, something along those lines?
I mean, the best thing you can do, especially in your 20s, is invest in yourself. And I had mentors along the way. I literally 2 weeks ago, I had 8 University of Texas college kids come over here to sauna with me, and I enjoyed the hell out of it. These are people who are, going to be the AI experts in the next 5 years. So I learned just as much from them as they learned from me. But the only way to fast track success is to surround yourself with people who've gotten where you want to go. So I think it's so powerful. When someone sends me a thoughtful message on social media, I have this on a regular basis. Can I fly in to, hit a workout with you? Can I fly in to do a contrast therapy session with you? And if it's a thoughtful message and I feel like there's going to be a good relationship between the two of us, I'll be like, yeah, book a flight. Let me know when. I'll block it off in my calendar. So, I do enjoy that a lot, and it's so beneficial. Like I said before, I don't really watch the news. I do listen to podcasts here and there, and I'll watch YouTube, but the majority of my learnings come from these sauna hangs that I have from other people who are pushing the ball forward in whatever vertical it is. So learn from others. It's so, so powerful. And don't be afraid to send that DM to someone. Don't be afraid to call that person or to knock on that door. That's what I did when I was in my 20s, and it helped get me where I am now. So I see that in people who are young and reach out to me that was me then. I want to help them out. So don't be afraid to reach out to that person.
Yeah, I always say, Eric, that when I was 25 years old, I was incorrigible, man. I was terrible. And so the advice I give the young guys today is, maybe if life is a 100 gig hard drive, when you're 25 years old, maybe it's 20% full. And then maybe you've had my experiences, and at 57 or yours at your age and all the experience you've had, maybe ours is 80% full. And I don't know about you though. And this is what I tell them. When I was 25, I thought mine was 80% full. And now that I'm at 57, man, I think it's at 20%. And there's so much more to learn. What's your response to that?
I concur 1000%. You feel like you know it all when you're in your teens and your 20s, and that, your parents aren't giving you the right advice. You know it, but experience is the most important thing in the world. So I have learned that as well. And yeah, I feel like my CPU is less full now than it was then, especially with all the new tools coming out. I was in Toronto this past weekend with a friend who's an absolute AI expert in his early 20s. And, what he was speaking to me was just foreign. Like I couldn't comprehend all of the things he was using AI for. So, I had him download Claude on my computer and had him show me how to use it to do different things I'm doing now, but I can do it, 100 times faster. So yeah, I think as you get older, you recognize the importance of learning from others, and that everyone can, you can learn from everyone.
Yeah, and I think it's been a change, maybe led by social media, from my perspective, over the last 10 years, but it's probably much longer than that, where the older you get, they're unlike other civilizations and other societies. The West likes to put the older guys out to pasture. And I always thought, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, because they're the ones, again, back to my experience starting in that group that I did when I was 30 years old. I didn't know anything. And I just sat there for 2.5 years and shut up and listened and soaked it all up. And so from my perspective, I think I see that's a downside to social media, is it's the young guys, taking that picture in front of the Lamborghini, talking about if you work more than 4 hours and you're not on the south of France, to use Matt's example, then you're
Yeah.
doing something wrong.
Yeah, that's not the norm. Can you get rich quick on social media? Yes, but it's not the norm. Very few are able to do that. And they have to be a very skilled content creator. And you usually don't know the backstory. You don't know that from, 12 to 18, that's all they were doing was creating content that allowed them at 18 to 22 to start building that YouTube channel that gave them the money to lease the Lambo that makes them look rich. So yeah, I mean, it's an illusion oftentimes. And the successful people I know, they're not flaunting their money in that way. They might have nice things, but they don't flaunt it, and they're not selling courses generally. I think there is, again, it's easy to put this illusion out there with social media and make it look like you have all of the reapings of success where you just don't know that person's backstory, or if it's just, one post that puts them up on the mountain when, they may not really be on the mountain. It might not be the right advice.
Yeah, I've had a car nut, so I've had big car collections over my life. And anytime I'm in something, that young guy wants to ask me a question about, first question they always ask me is, what do you do for a living? And I always say, I worked with the drive-through at McDonald's when I was 16 years old, and I took lessons I learned making $3.05 an hour working at McDonald's in my businesses today. I don't answer, this is what I do now. I worked at McDonald's when I was 16 years old. I want to give that some perspective.
I love that.
Yeah, and as you've been building the Founders Only Club, are there any things that you would have done differently, knowing now throughout that progression of building out that business?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as you build any business, you recognize things that you could have done earlier on that will yield value. I mean, right now, like I said, we're building out this AI tool that allows people to connect with each other who will benefit from knowing each other. I wish I had been doing this for the last 2 years with all of the people that have been over to our house, where I was just kind of assembling the information from people to be able to put that in there. Systems is not my strong point. I'm very good at executing, but like taking a step back and building systems aren't my strong point. So I just I partnered with the founder of Ice Barrel to help me run Founders Only. And he is a systems guy. He is an expert at building systems. So I wish I had done that earlier in the business, of partnered with someone who could help me with what my weakness was, so that we could have built the infrastructure from the start, be able to grow it even faster. But hindsight's 2020,
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad that we are where we are and it's progressing, and we're going to continue building tools that will help it scale faster. Yeah, I think understanding what your weaknesses are and finding that team, finding that partner, finding that operator to help you with that, like many of those things can help you grow way faster than if you try to do all of these things yourself, knowing that no one is an expert at everything. Like, we all have our strong suits. I think one of the most powerful skills we can learn is just doing what we do best and finding people who can do the other things, so we can just keep doing what we do best.
Yeah, I like that. Know what you're not good at. When I was younger, the guys used to tell me something, the older guys that were working for me, and they were working for me, so I didn't listen, but they used to piss me off. They used to tell me, you don't know anything till you're 40, back to my 80-20 example. And they told me, you don't know anything till you're 40. And I was like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. You're working for me. And then I got to be 42, 43, 44, and I remembered that. And I was like, you know what, man? That's absolutely true. You really don't come into your own until you're 40 years old. You just don't have enough experience. What's that?
Yep, agree.
The question there is what's one thing that you kind of thought was the truth, only you learned later that it was 100% incorrect? Or maybe you can flip that and say something that was incorrect that you learned to be true.
Man, I mean, the biggest thing for me in my 20s was just living a life for others, just like showcasing that I had things that made me successful, like spending too much money early on nice clothes, nice things, nice houses, nice cars, instead of investing that money that would have compounded more over time. And, I just think that's the natural progression of life. When you're young, your ego takes over. And then as you get older, I think your soul takes over. You start to recognize like what is soul fulfilling, versus what is ego fulfilling. And we're just bombarded with marketing. And I'm part of the problem. It's a lot of my business is marketing, but I think marketing often just makes us live for others and makes us just live our lives for the public perception of success, as opposed to the, soul fulfilling, perfect day. I'm living out my passions and purpose, and I figured out a way to monetize it.
I love it. Real quick, in the last minute and a half we got here, I want to do a speed round. I like doing these at the end. Just give me your, right off the top of your head, couple of word answers. Discipline or talent?
Discipline.
Yeah. Cash flow or equity?
Equity.
Sleep or grind?
Man, they're both so important. I'm going to answer that with a few more words, but the grind is important. Like, you have to put in the work, but I think too many people neglect sleep. I think there's periods of time where you can, put your head above the ceiling and sacrifice sleep in order to get shit done. But I don't know. I've had my best work when I sleep well. So I'm going to answer that with probably the controversial answer and say that sleep is so important so that you can work purposefully instead of just work hard.
In this latest iteration of my life, I'll just add, the one thing I've not been able to conquer is sleep. I've always been a 6 hour night guy, 5.5 hour night guy. I keep telling myself I'm going to do 7 and I can't get there. So I'm guilty as charged. Brand or product?
Over time, 100%. If you want to build a lasting company, brand.
Interesting. Therapy or cold plunge?
What was the first one?
Therapy. Going to therapy.
Or cold plunge. For me, I don't have any major mental health issues, so I would answer that with cold exposure. But if you have mental health issues, then, I certainly don't want to discount the importance of trained therapy.
And this one's kind of the same question, just backwards. What is overrated and underrated in entrepreneurship? We'll start with overrated. What's overrated?
Overrated, I would honestly say, is entrepreneurship. It's just so easy to start a business. And I think everyone wants to be an entrepreneur. Everyone wants to start a business now because there's this perception that it's easy. You see the $1 billion brand that was built over 5 years and the founder with the Ferraris and the nice house, but that's one in a million. So I would say what's overrated is being an entrepreneur. It's way harder than you think. And what is underrated? I would say what's underrated is compounding consistencies, the importance of just doing things repetitively and how far that will get you versus trying to be superhuman, one day out of the week.
Yeah, I like all of that. And I'm going to add really quick, I'm a big sauna guy, 25, 30 minutes every single day. I never miss 175 degrees or hotter. And some of the best business, some of the best advice, some of the best decisions, some of the best conversations take place in that sauna. When you said that, I was like, man, that's my life. I'm always talking about. And in the sauna today, the guy said X. I don't know why that is specifically. You probably do, but you're 100% right. We really appreciate you coming on, Eric. And for folks, what's the best way? Where do you want to send folks? What do you want to tell them?
Yep. Instagram is where I have the most presence. Just my name, Eric Hinman. And then I have a YouTube channel as well, which is my name, Eric Hinman. And then website, erichinman.com. And if you are interested in Founders Only, it is foundersonly.club. And we have an online community. And then we have those in-person wellness retreats. One of them, which will be in Bentonville, Arkansas this fall.
Eric, we appreciate it. Thanks, my friend.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely.